The Eternal Fog. It was a cold, misty evening when Sarah decided to take the scenic route home from her shift at the local diner. Her old sedan hummed softly as it moved through the winding country road. The fog that had been light earlier had thickened into a dense shroud, obscuring the trees that lined the road. Sarah cursed herself for not leaving earlier, but the thought of her cozy home awaiting her kept her spirits up. As she drove, her radio began to crackle. Static overtook the soothing voice of the radio host, and Sarah furrowed her brow. "Just great," she muttered, fiddling with the knobs. Suddenly, a faint voice emerged from the static. "Turn back. Don't keep driving." The words were chilling, almost pleading. Sarah froze, her hand on the dial. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The static continued, and the voice disappeared as quickly as it had come. Sarah shook her head, laughing nervously. "I've been working too hard. Need some rest." She dismissed it as her imagination and focused on the road. Minutes later, she spotted a figure standing by the side of the road. A man, clad in a tattered coat, waved his hand for her to stop. Against her better judgment, Sarah slowed down and rolled down her window. "Are you okay?" she asked. The man's face was pale, his eyes sunken. "You shouldn't be here," he said hoarsely, leaning closer to her car. "The fog, it doesn't let you leave." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean? Are you hurt?" Before he could answer, the man's head snapped toward the woods. His expression turned to one of sheer terror. "They're coming," he whispered. "Run!" Without warning, he bolted into the forest, disappearing into the fog. Sarah's heart raced as she stared at the spot where he had vanished. "This is insane," she muttered, pressing on the gas pedal. Her car sped forward, but the fog seemed to thicken, swallowing the road ahead. The GPS on her phone beeped, signaling a loss of connection. Panic set in as she realized she had no way of navigating the unfamiliar area. She kept driving, hoping to find a sign or landmark, but the landscape remained the same, endless fog and shadowy trees. Suddenly, her headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. Sarah slammed on the brakes, her car screeching to a halt. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the figure. It was the same man she had just seen by the roadside. He pointed to her with a trembling hand. "You didn't listen," he said. "Now it's too late." Before she could respond, a deafening sound filled the air. It was a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through her entire body. Sarah turned to look behind her and saw shapes moving in the fog. Tall, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and glowing red eyes. They moved unnaturally, their jerky movements accompanied by wet, slapping sounds. Sarah screamed and floored the gas pedal, swerving around the man in the road. Her car sped through the fog, but no matter how far she drove, the shapes kept pace with her, their glowing eyes piercing through the mist. Her car's engine began to sputter. "No, no, no!" she cried, slamming her hands against the steering wheel. The vehicle came to a halt, the engine dead. Sarah fumbled with her phone, but it refused to turn on. She was alone, surrounded by the suffocating fog and the horrifying figures closing in. Desperate, she got out of the car and ran toward the woods, hoping to find shelter. The air was cold, each breath forming a cloud in front of her. She stumbled over roots and rocks, her heart pounding as the growls grew louder. Finally, she reached a clearing. In the center stood an old stone structure resembling a chapel. The door was slightly ajar, and faint light spilled out. Without hesitation, Sarah ran inside and slammed the door shut behind her. The interior was dimly lit by flickering candles. The air was thick with the scent of burning wax and something metallic. Sarah's eyes adjusted to the gloom, and she noticed writing on the walls, symbols and phrases in a language she couldn't understand. A voice echoed through the room. "You should not have come." Sarah spun around to see an elderly woman sitting in the corner, her face obscured by a dark hood. "What is this place?" Sarah demanded. "What are those things outside?" The woman chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "The fog is alive. It traps those who wander too far, and the creatures, they are its guardians. There is no escape, child." Sarah backed away, her heart sinking. "There has to be a way out," she insisted. The woman pointed to a large mirror at the back of the room. "The mirror is the only way, but it demands a price." Sarah hesitated, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her reflection smiled back, though her own face remained frozen in terror. The reflection's hand reached out of the glass, beckoning her forward. "What price?" Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your soul," the woe